Hi, this is Jeff Blauette, technical agronomist with Cooperative Farmers Elevator, and on this week's Field Friday segment, I think we're going to change it to a fertilizer plant Friday, just for something a little different to talk today. We're in front of this beautiful mountain of this red garnet potash, probably got a couple thousand ton of potash behind me. But you know, earlier this summer we talked about a lot of the deficiencies and things that we were running into. Probably saw more potassium deficiency than I've ever seen as far as foliar symptoms in the crops this year. So should we change what we're doing? Should we adjust some things based on what we saw this year in our fertility strategy? And I would kind of tend to say no. We had such an extreme year at certain parts of the year. Our soil moisture and our rainfall patterns just were not very good for us to be able to get those crops to take up the nutrients that we normally would expect to be taken up. So I think we need to keep our eye on the ball and stay with some of the same strategies we've had success with in the past. I think sometimes you chalk it up to one-offs that this was just a unique year. A couple things that we do need to keep in mind. Iowa State's changed their fertility recommendations. They've upped the levels of phosphorus and potassium recommendations from prior years. They've increased the phosphorus levels maybe roughly 4 parts per million from what they had prior recommended, and potassium maybe another 20 parts per million. Been around this game a long time. I think we've increased potassium levels 3 or 4 times on the recommendations. In the last 30 years, this is the first time we've seen an increase in the recommended phosphorus levels. So that's just something to keep in mind as far as your fertility threshold you're building to, whether you're fertilizing with, you know, fertilizer out of a fertilizer plant or manure. We need to kind of keep in mind what our threshold should be. We kind of have probably seen that before with a lot of our yield monitored data analysis at our fertility levels, where we're seeing the yields continue to rise. We're probably a little higher than what Iowa State had prior. So that's good to see they're kind of seeing the same things we are. Iowa State is actually one of the only universities still doing active fertility recommendation research for phosphorus and potash. So this is current updated information. You know, as our hybrids change, our yield levels change, maybe that's kind of what we're seeing is, you know, that needed for a little bit more aggressive levels. But, you know, like I say, we had a tough year. We had a lot of phosphorus and potash that maybe we didn't get into the plants that we had applied in some cases where it was drier. That fertilizer didn't go anywhere. The P and K don't leach away. As long as your pHs aren't too high, it shouldn't be getting overly or excessively tied up. So it still should kind of be there available for next year, which is good. We didn't get the breakdown of our manures, maybe like we usually do with a lower amount of microbial activity and breakdown because of the dry soils. But that, again, that didn't go anywhere either. That'll still be there for, you know, for the future crops as well. So we just don't need to overreact on anything from this year. Just hope for, you know, a little bit more moisture to work with next year. So just wanted to kind of touch on that, just from some things that we've seen this year. How should we change or not? Again, with fertility, I don't think we need to overreact and change a whole lot from what we've been doing from that perspective. So the other thing that may affect our fertility decisions, or maybe shouldn't, we also have seen the fertility prices drop precipitously from last year. A lot of the fertilizer that we're going to be using is probably somewhere between 55 and 65% of the cost from last year. So it has come down quite a bit. I would probably recommend some of those. You may want to get some of those prices locked in because they are pretty solid. In a lot of cases, the fertilizer prices have dropped more than the corn prices, so ratio-wise, we're at least as good or better than we were a year ago on how these fertilizer markets are reacting. So, but just wanted to touch on a few of these items. I guess with that, that's this week's Field Friday. We'll see you next week.